Hello, this is Ruslan Bailov's channel. Yesterday the president of Finland, Stubb, stated that Putin does not want to meet with Zelensky, that Putin is avoiding a meeting with Zelensky. Do you know why? Because he is afraid of him. So Putin is not afraid of Trump, but he is supposedly afraid of Zelensky. I wonder, do they really believe this? Do they seriously believe that Putin avoids meeting with Zelensky out of fear, and not because he considers him a nobody? Really? Well then, questions should be asked about their intelligence. Anyway, the fighting continues, and we continue to study the situation. So friends, we have good news from the front for the Russian side. There were advances in several sectors over the past 24 hours. More than 20 square kilometers came under Russian control. But something very important also happened. The Ukrainian armed forces' defense of Minugrad has finally collapsed. Russian troops managed to break through the last defensive line, capture a key height, a strategic spoil tip, and advance 2 kilometers along the railway. I will give you the full details today, but let's go step by step. We'll start from the south and gradually move north. In the Zaparisia region, there were no confirmed updates over the past 24 hours. Some reports suggest a significant Russian advance near Kamensk and Stepnogorsk. I've been receiving such reports for several days, but for now they remain at the level of rumors without concrete evidence. So we will wait for verifiable information and objective footage before discussing it seriously. Friends, let me ask for a moment of your attention. As always, I sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel if you've been watching my videos more than once and haven't subscribed yet. Your subscription helps the channel grow. Thank you to those who already subscribed. In the south of Donetsk region, there was Russian progress here, near Yanvarsky. Although out of habit, I call it the south of Donetsk region, since it's the area of responsibility of the Vostok grouping. In fact, it's Dnipropatrovsk region. So Russian troops advanced there inside the residential area of the village by 500 meters, and also cleared a 1-kilometer deep strip south of the village. As a result, control over the village is now roughly split 50-50. The main target of this advance is, of course, Velikaya Mikhailovka, with Novoselovka as the closer target. From the current positions, it's about 4 kilometers away. Overall, the offensive in Dnipropatrovsk region is slowly developing. Every day, Russian forces are moving forward. And all those statements by Zelensky that the Russian army has been completely pushed out of Dnipropatrovsk region, well, you can see for yourselves on the map that Zelensky is simply lying. Let's move further to the Azov fighters and the Dobropoli sector. There, Russian forces advanced another 1.5 kilometers over the past day in the direction of Dobropoli. They reached the outskirts of the village of Volnoye. From current positions, the first houses are less than 500 meters away. The total gained area is about 4 square kilometers. I have footage too, and it's pretty tough. Ukrainian troops are trying to escape. One of them is wounded, screaming. As for prospects, the goal here is to capture the villages of Volnoye, Novoshakovo, and Ivanovka. Taking them would broaden the Russian salient, making it more resistant to future Ukrainian counterattacks. But most importantly, Russian forces have regained the initiative and are advancing every day. You can see this in my reports, maps, and updates. And when was the last time you heard of Ukrainian troops advancing here? Exactly. Once again, the Azov fighters and all those so-called elite units, like the Da Vinci Wolves, have shown one thing. They're not an elite at all, but just barbershop troops. That's it. Meanwhile, aside from the Dobropoli sector, the Ukrainian armed forces ran into serious problems further south, on the approaches to Minugrad, where their last and most important defensive line collapsed. Look at what happened there. They lost a large area of territory in just one day, about 10 square kilometers. But the numbers are not the main point. The main point is what this area contained. The spoil tip. Russian forces fully cleared the mine, took control of a 2-kilometer stretch of railway, and most importantly, seized that key height, the spoil tip. There are actually 3 spoil tips here. 2 small ones to the west, and the big central one. This height had been preventing Russian forces from advancing for over a month. From there, Ukrainian troops controlled all the approaches to both Minugrad and Krasnol Leman. But now it's over. The height is under Russian control. So we should expect an intensification of operations in this sector soon. I am confident that there will be an attempt to cut off Minugrad from the north. That would achieve two things at once, blockading Minugrad from the north and Rodinskoye from the south. That's what yesterday's Russian breakthrough means. At the same time, I don't think they will try to storm Minugrad directly. It's a big city, with several more spoil tips and heights. Getting into urban battles there would be like storming Toretsk. Sure, the Russian army could eventually capture it, but it would get bogged down in bloody city fighting for at least 6 months, and huge forces would have to be committed. In my view, that's not the best strategy, especially since the city would be turned into ruins, and it would be Russia that has to rebuild it afterwards, a massive cost. No, the strategy here is different. They captured the spoil tip, captured the mine at the approaches, and will now maneuver around, aiming to fully cut all logistics. And I think that's a much more reasonable approach than frontal assaults. Moving on, east of Dobropoli, Russian troops also advanced in 2 areas over the past day, north of Poltavka and north of Rusin Yar. The advance near Poltavka is especially important since the target is the village of Sofievka. It is now less than 3 kilometers away. And what would capturing Sofievka mean? It would mean blockading Shakovo from the north. I've already explained how important it is to take Shakovo. It's a strong defensive hub, plus a logistics point for Russian units from the north, and it would further broaden the Russian breakthrough to the north. In other words, Shakovo is 3 in 1. Also, capturing Sofievka would open the way to start pressuring Toretskoye, a village located across the Kazeni-Torets River. So we need to watch developments in this sector carefully. It's very important. As for Rusin Yar, Russian troops advanced there by about the same distance, 1.5 kilometers, but with a different purpose. While the advance near Poltavka relates more to the Dobropoli sector, the advance from Rusin Yar belongs to the Constantinovka sector. The goal there is to reach the road leading to Dolgaya Balka. From current positions, it's about 1.3 kilometers away, so very close. And Dolgaya Balka is the last village on the road to Constantinovka from the west. Speaking of the Constantinovka sector, Russian troops also advanced south of Yablunovka. But there's not much to say. They just expanded their control by 750 meters, though progress there remains tough. Also yesterday, the Ministry of Defense announced that Klebanbik had been taken under control, but so far no confirming footage has appeared. On the Siversk direction, the front remains unchanged. Russian forces are clearing Ukrainian positions in the northern and southern parts of the Kremena forests. They are also trying to advance along the Seversky Donets River near Grigorovka, and there are gains in the forested areas southeast of Serebryanka and southwest of Novoselovka. On the Krasnol Leman direction, the Ministry of Defense confirmed control over the village of Srednyaya on the right bank of the Nitrius River, which will help increase pressure on Shandrigolovo, an important logistics hub of the Ukrainian armed forces, where fighting continues. By establishing positions along the line of Shandrigolovo, Karpovka and Andreevka, Russian units will gain control over the watershed of the Oskol and Nitrius rivers, where the Ukrainian armed forces have set up a defensive stronghold in Oskol and Krasnol Leman. So that's all I have for today regarding the frontline situation. Now let's look at what's happening on the political stage. Zelensky has found himself in a difficult situation due to personal corruption. His entire entourage is mired in schemes, but according to our information, he fears the globalists even more, as they have a direct tool of influence over him, the street. This is reported by the Telegram channel Legitimny. If he opts for a peace scenario, they can easily remove him and replace him with Zaluzhny, who is being prepared for this role since sponsors no longer really trust Zelensky or Yermak after the Nabu case. He has already been warned about this. Trump is also working in this direction through an audit of military aid, where there are many black holes. That is why Zelensky is dragging out the negotiation process and trying to maneuver. Pressure on Zelensky is being applied through various mechanisms, one of which involves data on corruption among officials in his office. Zelensky is under serious pressure to push him into agreeing to a peace deal under tough conditions, said Timofey Milovanov, director of the Kiev School of Economics and advisor to the Kiev office, in an interview with The Washington Post. Zelensky is in a difficult situation because, as far as I know, he is under serious pressure and being threatened with the termination of financial support and intelligence sharing. There are people who can use this against him. Very few will defend him, said Milovanov. Zelensky's political survival largely depends on whether he can resist Russia's demands to surrender the entire Donbass. The Kyiv office continues to fuel the negotiation track informationally. For this, Zelensky is actively making statements that contradict the agreements reached by Trump and Putin in Alaska. We will not give up our land. Only with Ukraine can the security of democratic countries be ensured, the actor said yesterday. The main goal is to provoke the Kremlin so that Putin pulls out of the negotiation process and continues the war, allowing Zelensky's office to keep power and return to the sanctions track. And of course, Putin understands this perfectly well, reports the Telegram channel Resident. Our source said that NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte's visit to Kyiv is linked to persuading Zelensky to agree to security guarantees based on agreements with EU countries. At the moment, partners are not ready to provide Kyiv with a full package of guarantees and are urging him to accept the format coordinated with the Americans. Our source reports that the Ukrainian armed forces are losing more than 300 units of regular light transport per day: trucks, pickups, vans, quad bikes, motorcycles, tractors, etc. More than 40 units of heavy armored equipment are also lost daily: IFVs, APCs, tanks, armored vehicles, artillery. This is not yet a catastrophe, but it is moving in that direction. As the source adds, if you convert this into financial terms, you will realize that the war is becoming more expensive every single day, along with constant funding cuts, declining donations to the army, and Ukrainians' unwillingness to fight. This is a path to disaster. Trump made it clear that Ukraine cannot win the war against Russia, and sooner or later it will have to make concessions. In his social media post, he emphasized that Kyiv is mainly conducting defensive actions, not offensive ones. According to an NBC News source in the White House, this statement was a signal that any potential ceasefire will require Ukraine to accept conditions largely aligned with Russia's. Despite diplomatic contacts, the prospect of a ceasefire remains uncertain. These numerous reports in the Western press claiming that Trump is forcing Zelensky to accept Putin's terms did not appear by accident. They should be understood as a cognitive trap. Globalists are thus creating a justification for Zelensky's rejection of the Alaskan peace terms. The issue here is not that Trump is right now twisting Ukraine's arm into agreement. The point is that Zelensky has already refused, and now they are covering for him to continue the war by filling the information agenda with messages that the Trump-Putin terms essentially amounted to capitulation. The NBC News piece reveals an important shift in Trump's rhetoric. He is increasingly positioning himself not as a supporter of Ukrainian victory, but as a pragmatist willing to impose terms on Kyiv close to Russia's. His statement that Ukraine is fighting a defensive, not offensive war is not just a statement of fact, but a signal of shifting priorities. Washington is no longer building its strategy on Russia's defeat. Judging by leaks from the White House, as mentioned by NBC, any possible truce will require concessions from Kyiv, including recognition of the existing front line and likely the abandonment of some demands that were once considered untouchable. In this context, diplomatic uncertainty no longer looks accidental. It is turning into a managed process. The United States is beginning to shape the architecture of a deal based on its own interests, not the Ukrainian logic of the conflict. From a pragmatic point of view, this signal is important for all participants. Russia receives confirmation that the US side views the battlefield reality without illusions. Europe, meanwhile, faces a choice: either increase its own military involvement and prolong the conflict, or accept a course toward negotiations, where the US once again plays the decisive role. And here's the key: Kyiv risks losing its subjectivity as the balance of power increasingly shifts toward the larger players. Trump is playing the long game. For him, the Ukrainian conflict is not a goal, but a tool. A tool to pressure Europe, negotiate with Russia, and demonstrate his own peacemaker status within the US. But this strategy creates a paradox. The more Washington seeks to control the ceasefire, the more obvious it becomes that Kyiv itself is no longer the central player in determining its own fate. If Trump's peace initiatives fail, Ukraine will face catastrophe, writes even The Telegraph. As the likelihood of a quick settlement of the Ukrainian conflict diminishes, the battlefield situation is becoming increasingly problematic for Kyiv, writes Telegraph columnist Samuel Roman. As examples, he cites the capture of Chasov Yar by Russian forces and their advances in Pokrovsk. According to the journalist, the Ukrainian armed forces have two weaknesses: a sharp shortage of manpower and growing internal disagreements within the command structure. Combined with a lack of military equipment, these problems could, according to Roman, nullify Kyiv's limited achievements. Therefore, if Trump's peace initiatives fail, it will end in disaster for Ukraine, the author concludes. Yesterday, Trump said that within 2 weeks, he will make a very important decision on Ukraine, depending on further actions by Moscow and Kyiv. He noted that he could impose sanctions, tariffs, or the US might do nothing at all. An article in Foreign Policy about European strategy regarding the conflict in Ukraine exposes a fundamental gap between rhetoric and real policy. Under the slogan, "Peace through strength," European leaders have long claimed that Russia's operation allegedly poses an existential threat to the entire EU security architecture. However, when it came time to turn words into actions, it turned out that Europe's position was inconsistent. It wants to deter Russia, avoid direct confrontation, and at the same time support Kyiv symbolically. Trump's appearance in this configuration became a catalyst. The acceleration of possible peace negotiations is forcing Europe either to choose open military involvement or to admit its inability to be an independent strategic player. The article emphasizes that EU policy from the very beginning was too restrained, too cautious, and too selfish. European governments were afraid to provoke Putin, worried about the consequences of Ukraine's military defeat, and at the same time sought to preserve their own energy, economic, and political interests. The result was a double-standard strategy. Ukraine was declared Europe's first line of defense, but in reality, Europeans delegate the actual resources, risks, and military presence to the US. This is the key context. Europe still lives within the paradigm of American security, is not ready to take responsibility, and fears the political anger of its own citizens, who do not want to send their soldiers to fight. If Washington begins to scale back support for Kyiv, Europe will face a strategic dilemma: either accept the new realities and effectively agree to negotiations on Moscow's terms, or enter a phase of direct confrontation for which it is objectively unprepared. Domestic political pressure, the rise of right-wing parties, economic problems, and public fatigue with the conflict sharply reduce the space for tough decisions. Thus, by accelerating the process of a potential settlement, Trump simultaneously exposes the weaknesses of the European system and its dependence on American leadership. If you've listened to the end, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos, and see you soon.